declaring martial law to thwart what were labelled as anti-state forces. He has now lifted the martial law after the parliament rejected his attempt to ban political activity and censor the media. We will bring you the latest on South Korea's political crisis.
Also, right here on World DNA, amid heightened tensions in Syria, Russia's army claims that it launched hypersonic missiles during naval and air force drills in the eastern Mediterranean. This, as Russia has also stepped up support for Syria to counter a rebel offensive in the country. We will be bringing you the latest details on that front as well. This and a lot more right here on World DNA. Let's start with the headlines.
South Korea's opposition vows to start impeachment proceedings unless President Yoon Suk-yeol resigns after President lifts short-lived martial law.
Russia accuses Ukrainian intelligence services of aiding rebels fighting against President Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria.
French lawmakers to vote today on no confidence motion to topple Prime Minister Michel Barnier's coalition government.
Donald Trump seeks to dismiss his criminal fraud conviction in the hush money case, arguing that President Joe Biden used similar reasoning to pardon his son.
US President-elect Donald Trump's choice to lead the Drug Enforcement Administration, Chad Chronister, withdraws from consideration, second Trump pick to do so after being nominated.
Barcelona returned to winning ways with a thumping 5-1 win over Mallorca in the Spanish top flight. The Catalan Giants now have a 4 points lead over Real Madrid but have played 2 more matches. South Korea's main opposition party has said that it would initiate impeachment proceedings against President Yoon Suk-yeol unless he immediately resigned.
And this after his short-lived declaration of martial law overnight. Yoon imposed martial law, vowing to eliminate anti-state forces as he struggled against an opposition that controls parliament and that he accuses of sympathizing with communist North Korea.
This move plunged the country into its deepest turmoil in its modern democratic history. A fleet of tanks, armored vehicles were mobilized as thousands flooded the streets. Lawmakers jumped fences and tussled with security forces so that they could reach the parliament and vote to overturn the law.
The president's surprising move harkened back to an era of authoritarian leaders that the country had not seen since the 1980s, and it was immediately denounced by the opposition and the leader of Yoon's own party.
Yoon Suk-yeol backed down after 190 lawmakers managed to get into the assembly and unanimously voted to oppose the martial law. The vote was 190 to 0 Under the constitution, martial law must be lifted when a majority in parliament demands it. While announcing his plan to lift martial law, Yoon continued to criticize parliament's attempts to impeach key government officials and senior prosecutors and lawmakers.
I request that the Parliament immediately ceases the reckless actions that are paralyzing the functions of the state, such as repeated impeachment, legislative manipulation and budget manipulation.
The U-turn prompted celebrations among protesters outside Parliament who had been braving the freezing temperatures.
Meanwhile, despite South Korea being a major ally for the United States in Asia, Washington said it was not given advance notice of Yoon's plan to impose martial law.
We are relieved President Yoon has reversed course on his concerning declaration of martial law and respected the ROK National Assembly's vote to end it. A National Security Council spokesperson said this.
On the other hand, UK, Japan said that they were closely monitoring the developments. China, a key ally of North Korea, urged its nationals in the south to stay calm and exercise caution. All right, for more on this, we're now being joined live by Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly from Busan. He is a professor of political science at Busan National University. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, sir, the martial law lasted all of 6 hours.
Right.
Do you reckon this was an impulsive decision that was easily quashed in the parliament? And also, I just wanted to understand what your assessment of these anti-state forces is that Yoon Suk-yeol has been trying to thwart.
Yeah, first of all, I do think it was impulsive. I don't think anybody out there who studies South Korean politics expected this. I had took lots and lots of emails from friends who were saying, what is this? What's going on? I think really everybody was really surprised by this. I don't think the Yoon administration telegraphed this in any meaningful way. And it looks like Yoon did it for fairly small, unimportant reasons, like investigations into his wife and the budget and things like that. I mean, that's pretty shocking. I do think the larger issue, though, right, the anti-state forces that he's talked about, I think what that is sort of code for in South Korean politics is the suspicion by conservative parties, conservative politicians in South Korea, that left-wing parties in South Korea are pro-North Korea, and that they are willing to make excessive concessions, if you will, to North Korea in order to broker a peace, that they are sort of like Marxist or pro-communist or something like that. You know, and that kind of language is left over in South Korea, in part because the Cold War still is continuing in Korea. And so there's a lot of the kind of anti-communist suspicion and paranoia that used to characterize the West, 40 years ago, that still exists in South Korea.
Dr. Kelly, given the lack of support that Yoon Suk-yeol found within his own party, I just wanted to understand, seeing the way the martial law was in a way thwarted within hours, and it happened through the parliament, even though there were a limited number of lawmakers who were there, and I think out of 300 there were just 190, and all of them voted in favor of, rather against the martial law. What do you feel this is? How will this impact South Korea politics going forward, especially in terms of Yoon Suk-yeol's further term?
Right, his presidency. Yeah, I think he has to resign. I mean, in a democratic system, you just can't do this. I mean, I don't know. Donald Trump tried to overthrow the U.S. government and got reelected. So I don't know. Maybe Yoon thinks he can do something like that, right? But I mean, in a functioning democratic system, if you try to declare martial law, particularly for petty reasons like you can't get the budget you want, he should resign. And that's already what you're seeing, right? You're seeing labor unions and protesters and the left-wing parties in South Korea all demanding that he resign. His approval rating is under 20%, so he has no strong public backing to help keep him in office to overcome this. I don't see how he can stay in office at this point. If he decides to stay, he'll almost certainly face impeachment. South Korea already went through an impeachment 7 years ago, and they did it successfully without street violence or anything like that. So South Korea actually has experience impeaching presidents. It would be a shame for South Korea's stability if it had to impeach 2 presidents in less than a decade, but I just don't see what alternative there is at this point.
Dr. Kelly, also you're in joining us from Busan. I wanted to just understand from you, what were those 6 hours like when this martial law was in place?
Yeah, my family was sleeping. I mean, that's why people think it's like a coup, because he did it at like 11 o'clock at night, right? It was declared at like 11:15. I mean, I have 2 kids, right? And we went to bed and woke up and there it was already wrapping itself up. I mean, that's why there was a lot of suspicion that this wasn't martial law, but it was something like a coup, because you don't declare martial law at 11 o'clock at night and send the military into the streets when 80% of the population is asleep, right? I mean, that's one of the other things that's going to drive him out. This doesn't look like it was legitimately martial law. It looks like some kind of coup d'etat.
Dr. Kelly, I also wanted to understand the reasons leading up to the declaration of the martial law, because as I mentioned earlier as well, South Korea has not seen political tensions flare up in such a manner in decades. So what were the reasons that led up to this?
Yeah, and I think that's what people are really kind of confused about. I mean, we're still waiting to hear from Yoon himself, but it looks like he was frustrated by opposition in the parliament, where he faces a pretty solid liberal bloc. Yoon is from the Conservative Party. He faces a liberal progressive bloc in the parliament that was blocking a lot of his initiatives. I would argue that they were actually blocking him too much, that they were being obsessively obstructionist. I'm kind of sympathetic to Yoon's frustration with the South Korean parliament, but he went way too far, obviously, right? And then there were also Yoon's wife has been investigated. President Yoon's wife has been investigated for corruption, and there have been a lot of charges sort of swirling around her behavior for a couple of years. And the president personally is apparently very sensitive to this. He takes it really badly. He sees this as some kind of personal attack on the woman that he loves. And I think that's what was behind it. It doesn't look like this was some kind of coordinated thing. Like you said in your first question, it looks like it was kind of thrown together because, the police didn't seem to know very much about it. Nobody knew it was coming. It came out in the middle of the night.
Dr. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us right here on World DNA. And it was, I would say, informative to understand exactly what you were going through while staying in South Korea, because it happened in the middle of the night, and by the time everyone woke up, it was pretty much over.
Right.
So
it's pretty bizarre, right? So
definitely bizarre. And what kind of implications it will have, that's something we will need to track closely and observe. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your insights.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and now we're also joined by Bill Gallo, a Voice of America correspondent from Seoul. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. We were just speaking to Dr. Kelly, trying to understand what the situation is like. From what he said, this appeared to be more of a coup d'etat than an actual martial law, because it happened in the middle of the night. I want to understand from you, what's your perspective of this? What is actually happening at the moment?
It doesn't seem like this was very coordinated. I think that everyone is trying to put together the pieces at this point to find out exactly what happened. But as you may have discovered by now, we were all shocked by this. No one, and I mean no one, saw this coming in any way. It had actually been the subject of rumors for months by opposition officials who are big critics of Yoon. But this was mainly seen as sort of the typical mudslinging and back and forth that happens in Korea quite frequently. When this actually happened, though, it seemed very haphazard. In fact, the military didn't seem all that interested in actually enforcing Yoon's decree at all. You're seeing these images emerge from South Korea's parliament last night of the military sort of half-heartedly trying to interrupt proceedings, and then they were pushed back by a glass door and some legislative aides who had a fire extinguisher they were spraying at them. Obviously, the military could have pushed through if they wanted. So perhaps that suggests there was not a high degree of coordination involved in this martial law attempt.
Bill, I just wanted to understand from you, there were visuals of military vehicles on the roads, and there were also, reports suggesting that military helicopters were in, over Seoul. Do you feel that can be mobilized last minute, even if this was an impulsive decision?
I don't know. I really don't know. I know there were helicopters, and I know there were lots of troops, and I know that the South Korean people very firmly in the middle of the night came out to stop this in whatever way they could. And I also know that it didn't take very much to get the South Korean military to stand down. I think that whenever it was determined that, enough lawmakers had entered the parliament and passed this overruling of the decree, and it was notable, I think, how quickly Yoon actually said, okay, that's it. It's done. I give up. So really, it's unclear what exactly happened. That's the most notable thing of all this, right. I think, is just it's random. Nobody expected it. And Yoon is a leader that is prone to sort of making confusing decisions. But this one really, really is more confusing than anything we've ever seen.
This is what we've been discussing, and through our discussions, everyone seems to be drawing a blank there. What exactly happened? Because all of this happened over the course of a night. First there was martial law that was declared, then he stepped down completely, he took a step back. What we're trying to understand is what really led to this decision, because it is a pretty big decision to make. It's a Herculean task to get martial law into force, and how does that happen?
Well, I'm sorry I don't have better answers for you on this. All we really have is speculation. And I think Dr. Kelly did a good job of sort of laying out the various factors involved. I think that it is true that Yoon was very offended at the political attacks on his wife. I think he was very frustrated at the constant sort of political dysfunction and gridlock that has taken place in Parliament ever since he has been president. And that has only gotten worse after he lost the April legislative election. I think he took these problems very seriously. He is known, another big factor here, he is known to sort of smear his critics as being communists or pro-North Korea sympathizers. That is a vast oversimplification. There are certainly people in the political opposition who want to pursue better relations with North Korea, and you can agree or disagree with that. But to paint them as pro-North Korea or puppets of North Korea is an extreme simplification. So it may genuinely be that he sees the world in this way and has actually acted on those inclinations. We really don't know.
Well, as for the reactions we've picked up by now, it seems this entire ordeal has only reflected badly on Yoon Suk Yeol, and it exposes the lack of support he has from his own party, also the impulsive nature of the decisions he made. It's only reflecting all of that. Also, the fact that the opposition, the Democratic Party, is in majority in the parliament. So this was going to get overruled anyway, martial law. There is a provision for the parliament to rule it out. Very questionable decision, and we can only speculate as of now, but I think it's better we wait for the details to really draw a conclusion of what really happened. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill, and getting us all the latest. That was Bill Gallo, Voice of America correspondent, joining us from Seoul.
Thank you.
All right, we can move further from here. South Korea still definitely remains a curious case, exactly what happened through the night. As of now, let's move further. Amid a truce in effect between Israel and Hezbollah, Israeli strikes on southern Lebanon killed 11 people in a day, according to Lebanon's health ministry.
And these were the deadliest raids since the ceasefire took effect last Wednesday. Both sides have accused the other of repeated violations. The Lebanese ministry has said an Israeli drone strike on the town of Sheba killed one person. Earlier, while Hezbollah claimed its first attack on an Israeli position since the truce took effect, the Israeli military said it had struck Hezbollah terrorists, dozens of launchers and terrorist infrastructure throughout Lebanon.
Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has warned that if they return to war, they will act with greater force and that there will be no immunity for the state of Lebanon. During a tour of Israel's northern border, Katz said that until now, Israel has made a distinction between Lebanon and Hezbollah, but that will no longer be the case.
As the crossfire continued amid the truce, Lebanon's army command began a recruitment, with Prime Minister Najib Mikati saying the military is expanding in order to deploy more soldiers in the country's south. The move is aimed at implementing the ceasefire and ensuring that Israel withdraws its troops from Lebanese territory.
In neighboring Gaza, the United States has expressed outrage over Israeli airstrikes killing aid workers. Earlier on Saturday, 2 aid workers were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Khan Yunis, including Save the Children staffer. The US has urged Israel to investigate the allegations. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has announced that along with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he will co-chair a conference on the establishment of a Palestinian state in June of next year. Macron added that in the coming months, the two nations will multiply and combine diplomatic initiatives to bring everyone along this path.
Russia claims to have launched hypersonic missiles during naval and air force drills in eastern Mediterranean.
Well, the drills coincide with Russia's ally Syria losing ground to rebels in the country. Now, the Russian military stated that the number of troops stationed in the region had been increased to support the exercises. But in recent days, Russia has carried out airstrikes to counter rebel offensives that have caused Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces to lose control of Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. Moscow has been a crucial ally to Assad since the Syrian war began in 2011. Russia's defense ministry in a telegram post said that the precision sea-based missiles were launched in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea on December 3rd during an exercise to test the combined activities of Russian Navy and Air Force troop groups.
The drills involve the test firing of hypersonic Zircon missiles and a Caliber cruise missile from Russian vessels, as well as an Onyx cruise missile launched from a designated area on the Mediterranean coast. Russia has a naval base in Syria at Tartus, but the statement did not say where the drills were carried out. Moscow claimed that the exercise involved over 1,000 troops, 10 ships and 24 aircraft. The ministry published images showing the launch of several missiles from ships and land and images of a target in open water being hit and exploding. And with that, we wrap this bulletin. We will be back on the other side, but first let's take a look at the latest climate events that's making headlines across the globe.
South African opposition parties asked the country's top court to revive impeachment proceedings against President Cyril Ramaphosa over a scandal where more than $500,000 in cash was stashed in a couch at his ranch and then stolen. Outgoing US President Joe Biden visits Angola, fulfilling a promise made in late 2022 to visit sub-Saharan Africa. It is also Biden's first trip to the continent since becoming president. And designers give new life to second-hand clothing as Ghana's capital drowns in fast fashion waste. That's this week on World of Africa. At these times on WION, World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Know more, understand better, think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not the bombast. On the 26th of March, dynamic pricing, Baloch separatists, Gravitas cuts out the clutter. Gravitas keeps calm when others scream. Gravitas brings news to life. Weekdays 9 p.m. IST, 3:30 p.m. GMT. Gravitas. Seeing is believing.
Business Masters is an exciting show, I think, because it not only talks about the company's philosophies around how they have grown, but also how individuals have really used their own philosophy to integrate into businesses. I think this is very useful for anyone who's starting a business, who's running a business, or not just entrepreneurs, but even students and professionals who are wanting to get into business.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
WION brings you a special business talk show where we bring forth the stories of business leaders.
From breakthrough technologies to visionary leadership, we will unlock the trends, the tactics, and dive into the minds of the industry's most influential leaders.
WION brings you this special series to uncover what drives them in a candid talk show, WION Business Masters.
Welcome back to World DNA. Thank you so much for staying with us. Lots lined up for you on this side of the show. Let's get started with the headlines first.
South Korea's opposition vows to start impeachment proceedings unless President Yoon Suk-yeol resigns after President lifts short-lived martial law.
Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan says wife Bushra Bibi led last week's protest in Islamabad solely on his instructions.
Russia accuses Ukrainian intelligence services of aiding rebels fighting against President Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria.
French lawmakers to vote today on no confidence motion to topple Prime Minister Barnier's coalition government.
Donald Trump seeks to dismiss his criminal fraud conviction in the hush money case, arguing that President Joe Biden used similar reasonings to pardon his son.
Barcelona returned to winning ways with a thumping 5-1 win over Mallorca in the Spanish top flight. The Catalan Giants now have a 4-point lead over Real Madrid but have played 2 more matches.
Thousands of protesters gathered in Dhaka to protest against an attack on Bangladeshi consulate in the Indian state of Tripura.
The incident took place on Monday during protests against ISKCON leader Chinmay Krishnadas's arrest. The protesters say that the attack on Bangladeshi consulate in Agartala is an attack on the sovereignty and independence of Bangladesh.
আগরতলায় বাংলাদেশের যে সহকারী হাই কমিশনার আছে কমিশন কার্যালয় আছে সেখানে হামলা হয়েছে তো সুস্পষ্টভাবে বা আইন অনুসারে বিদেশে যে বাংলাদেশের কনসুলেটগুলো দূতাবাসগুলো এবং সহকারী হাই কমিশনারের যে কার্যালয়গুলো আছে সেগুলো বাংলাদেশের রাষ্ট্রীয় সম্পদ তো সুস্পষ্টভাবে এই হামলার মধ্য দিয়ে আমরা বুঝতে পারছি যে ইন্ডিয়ার মধ্য থেকে বা দিল্লির উস্কানিতে হিন্দুত্ববাদী একটা অংশ বাংলাদেশের সার্বভৌমত্বের উপরে সরাসরি আঘাত হানার চেষ্টা করছে আমরা এই ঘটনাকে তেমনই একটি ঘটনা হিসেবে মনে করছি
Amid the protest in the Bangladeshi capital, Chief Advisor to the interim government, Mohammad Yunus, has begun a series of dialogues to achieve unity. He met with the leaders of Students Against Discrimination and other student organizations on Tuesday. Yunus will also hold dialogues with other major political parties and religious groups.
Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Pranay Verma, met Acting Foreign Secretary Riaz Hamidullah. After the meeting, the Indian envoy said relations between the two countries cannot be reduced to just one issue.
Now, protesters had allegedly taken down the Bangladeshi flag taken down from the Assistant High Commission of Bangladesh in Tripura, in Agartala, and set it on fire.
This is something that we keep continuing talking about. We have such wide-ranging relationship, multifaceted relationship, and as I've said, you cannot reduce it to one issue or one agenda. We are working across so many issues.
Now, the Tripura police arrested 7 people for vandalizing the Bangladesh consulate in Agartala.
Bangladesh has expressed concern over the violent demonstrations and the vandalization. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs has regretted the incident. The ministry said the Indian government is stepping up security arrangements for the Bangladesh High Commission in New Delhi and their other missions in the country. Chinmay Krishna Das Brahmachari, a prominent former ISKCON leader, was arrested in Dhaka last month after protests by the community in Rangpur, demanding stronger legal protections for minority groups in Bangladesh. However, reports suggest that lawyers have refused to appear for him during his bail hearing that has now been deferred by a month. Reports suggest that lawyers representing him were reportedly attacked in Bangladesh. The Chattogram court postponed the hearing to 2nd of January after the Bar Association barred any legal professional from representing the religious leader.
Meanwhile, the UK has issued travel advisory and has urged British citizens to avoid non-essential travel to certain areas of Bangladesh due to potential risks. These include crowded places, religious gatherings and political rallies. All right, shifting our focus now, the Indian Space Agency ISRO is all set for the launch of its 4th rocket mission of this year.
And this will also be ISRO's first commercial mission for the year. The PSLV launch mission will hurl 2 European satellites into orbit on Wednesday.
The twin satellites are part of a European space science experiment which is called Proba 3. The name is derived from the Latin word which means to try or try it. Proba also is an abbreviation of Project for On-Board Autonomy. The mission is the 4th in the series of Proba missions that the European Space Agency has been performing over the last 2 decades.
European Space Agency combines the technological might 22 European member states to explore space-related technologies and promote economic growth in the region. Proba 3 is a unique mission involving 2 satellites. It aims to demonstrate precision flying in space, somewhat similar to how fighter pilots fly their aircraft in perfect sync. Proba 3 is a project more than 10 years in the making. More than 40 companies across Europe have contributed to this mission. And finally, the mission will be circling the Earth in less than 24 hours from now.
And WION's principal correspondent Siddharth MP brings us the latest details on the Proba 3 launch mission.
Well, Siddharth,
in the year 2001, the Indian Space Agency ISRO's PSLV rocket launched the European Space Agency's Proba 1 satellite. That marked the first instance of an Indian rocket launching the European Space Agency's satellite. And now 23 years later, we have another European Space Agency satellite, Proba 3, that is ready to launch on the Indian workhorse rocket, the PSLV. The rocket is now ready at the spaceport Satish Dhawan Space Center and the countdown is underway as we speak. This is a 25.5-hour countdown that commenced at 2:38 p.m. Indian time today. This is a countdown that will go on until 4:08 p.m. tomorrow, Wednesday. That's when the rocket will blast off to space. This is a crucial mission for the global science community because this is the first ever time that 2 satellites will fly extremely close in space in a pre-planned manner, and that too fully autonomously. This is known as a formation flying. Typically what fighter aircraft do and what expert pilots do, that's exactly what these 2 satellites will be doing fully autonomously in space. This is a technology demonstration, and both these satellites will be trying to look at the sun and study the solar corona, or the outermost atmospheric layer of the sun, which is also the source of space weather and solar flares. So it will be looking at that region to explore space weather. This is a very crucial mission. Once successful, this could pave the way for future missions, including more powerful space telescopes and related technologies that can be done using formation flying method. From Chennai, Siddharth MP, WION World is One.
Pro-European Union protests in Georgia continue to intensify.
Protesters took to the streets of Tbilisi for a 6th consecutive day demanding fair elections and asserted their right to EU membership and democratic values.
Now, thousands gathered for another night of pro-EU protests outside the Parliament building in Tbilisi. Police used water cannons against protesters who continued to throw fireworks. Police then sprayed tear gas at the crowd, but the Prime Minister has said that attempts at a revolution, well, those attempts are over in the country.
So the attempt to organize the Maidan in Georgia is already over. I would call everybody to keep quiet let's say, and to keep peace in this country. So we are responsible for that. I can assure everybody that there will be peace in this country.
Now, these comments come after the protests were triggered by the government's decision to suspend talks to join the EU. After over 220 people were detained during previous nights of protests, police used water cannons and tear gas to drive protesters away from the parliament building, where they have gathered each night since the ruling Georgian Dream Party's decision on Thursday.
The statement suspending the negotiations to join the EU marks yet another chapter in the debate over Georgia's identity. Since 2012, the Georgian Dream Party has been in power in the country. Critics accuse the party of trying to move the country away from the European Union and closer to Russia. The Georgian Dream claimed victory in last month's election, but opposition MPs have alleged fraud and boycotted the new parliament. On Thursday, the European Parliament backed a resolution calling the election the latest stage in Georgia's worsening democratic crisis. They have also held the ruling party fully responsible. The European Union also expressed concerns over reports of voter intimidation, vote buying and manipulation, and harassment of observers.
The Prime Minister has refused any potential negotiations with the opposition. The Georgian president had earlier accused the government of declaring war on its own people. The Prime Minister's claimed that the protests have been funded from abroad and vowed that there will be no revolution in Georgia.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has voiced deep concern over the violence in Tbilisi, condemning the use of unnecessary or disproportionate force against protesters and journalists.
All right, and South Korean stocks faced a sharp decline on Tuesday following President Yoon Suk-yeol's invocation of the emergency powers and declaration of martial law.
Well, the South Korea ETF index, which tracks over 90 major South Korean companies, dropped as much as 7%, hitting a 52-week low. While the ETF recovered slightly, closing down by 2.6%, it marked its fifth consecutive negative day, with trading volume reaching over 27 million shares, more than 8 times its average. Major companies also saw significant losses in their US, and the market turmoil was exacerbated by fears of instability in South Korea, the world's 13th largest economy.
South Korea's economic data also added to investor uncertainty. November exports grew at their lowest pace in over a year, rising just 1.4%. Shipments to key markets, including the United States and China, dropped, while a strike at an auto parts manufacturer and weather-related shipping delays further disrupted trade.
The country's currency, the South Korean won, weakened by nearly 2% against the US dollar, amplifying concerns about the future outlook for Asia's fourth largest economy. Meanwhile, South Korea's financial regulator said that it was ready to deploy over $7 billion in a stock market stabilization fund if needed.
And for more on this, the correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report. Listen to this.
The South Korean president's unexpected declaration of martial law led to significant market disruptions. The South Korean won depreciated over 2% against the US dollar, reaching a 2-year low. Also, the KOSPI index fell nearly 2% at the opening, with major companies like Samsung and LG experiencing declines. U.S. listed South Korean stocks and ETFs also saw losses of up to 6%. Now, following the National Assembly's unanimous vote to overturn the martial law and the president agreeing to do that, it did lead to some recovery in the markets, but ultimately, in response, South Korean authorities have pledged quote-unquote unlimited liquidity to stabilize the financial market. Regulator preparing for a $10 trillion won fund for market stabilization. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Next week on Wednesday, the annual closed-door Central Economic Work Conference will begin, during which China's top officials will discuss economic goals and stimulus initiatives for 2025.
And this is based on a Bloomberg report quoting sources. Take a look at our next report for more details on what to expect from this conclave.
Investors will be watching to see how the leaders of the world's second largest economy want to manage fiscal, monetary, and industrial policy. Last year's summit took place on the same dates and was attended by senior financial regulators and members of the nation's top leadership, including President Xi Jinping. The leaders of the ruling Communist Party probably won't say anything about the start time of the meeting. The public will only find out that it has happened when the minutes are released. The exact figures won't be disclosed until March's annual parliament session. However, investors will scan the statement for indications of the lawmakers' decisions. The return of Donald Trump to the White House brings a tariff war that may demolish bilateral commerce. Still, senior leaders are expected to debate keeping next year's growth rate in line with the 2024 target of about 5%. Economists from UBS Group and Barclays predict that policymakers will aim for a larger than usual deficit between 3.5 and 4% of GDP. If that were to happen, the government might borrow additional money to support the struggling economy. Rate cuts and a $1.4 trillion initiative to rescue distressed local governments are among the several stimulus measures unveiled by authorities since late September. China is now on course to meet its growth target for this year. However, authorities will likely want to leave some wiggle room in policy preparation for the incoming U.S. president. Trump has threatened China with 2 new tariffs in the last week. The People's Bank of China last pledged plans for a supportive monetary policy to encourage growth next year. This comes ahead of the impending trade war with the U.S. PBOC Governor Pan Gongsheng at a financial forum in Beijing said the central bank will adhere to an accommodative monetary policy stance and orientation in 2025. Next year, China's economy will need monetary policy assistance more than ever before, especially because the U.S. president-elect has promised to put high tariffs on Chinese imports. Since the pandemic, exports have been a major engine of China's economic development, but that forecast is now under jeopardy. Business Bureau report, WION World is One.
All right, on to developments now from the world of technology. An illegal online trading platform dealing in drugs, stolen data and other illicit goods has been seized by German authorities. Called Crime Network, the platform reportedly saw transactions worth $98 million between 2018 and 2024. As per reports, the transactions were carried out in Bitcoin and Monero cryptocurrencies, with the site charging fee and commissions up to 1 to 5% of the total sales value. Operating since 2012, the platform reportedly hosts more than 100 vendors and 100,000 customers. Meanwhile, the German police have arrested an unidentified 29-year-old man suspected of acting as one of the administrators of the site.
Meta has said that despite concerns regarding the possible interference of generative AI in major elections around the globe this year, the same did not happen. While speaking at a conference, Nick Clegg, Meta's president of global affairs, said fake accounts designed to spread propaganda or false information were unsuccessful in attracting a large audience on both Facebook and Instagram. He added that bad actors failed to effectively use AI technology. Meanwhile, Meta has said that most of the cover influence operations it has disrupted in recent years were carried out by actors from Russia, Iran and China.
Japan is planning to use AI to police anime and manga pirating websites. Every year, Japan ends up losing billions of dollars in lost revenue due to piracy. As per reports, there are over 1,000 illegal websites on the internet that are offering free downloads of Japanese content, most of which are globally renowned manga graphic novels. Under the new proposed scheme proposed by Tokyo's cultural agency, AI will scour the web for sites pirating manga, books and anime cartoons using a text and image detection system. Japan's move to use AI to tackle online manga and anime piracy is inspired by a similar project in South Korea. If successful, the same system could be applied to address the issues of pirated films and music in the future.
All right, let's give you a flavour of what's happening in sports. Ruud van Nistelrooy got off to a perfect start at Leicester City manager as the Foxes beat West Ham United 3-1 in the English Premier League. The Dutchman only took charge of the club on Friday after replacing Steve Cooper. Jamie Vardy gave Van Nistelrooy a dream start as he put Leicester ahead after just 98 seconds. Bilal El Khanous doubled the lead on the hour mark with his first goal in the league.